What's going on, guys? Crazy Pizza Man here. Today I'm going to be not using a proper arm for this microphone, and instead I'm just gonna hold it. But I also want to talk about the things I think the PS5 kind of needs to improve now that it's pretty far into its life cycle now. And I gotta say, it's a good console overall. I just think there's some minor quality of life improvements that I think it really needs to really shine. So without further ado, let's get right into it. But before I start, I just want to remind you guys, if you like the video at any point, just give me a subscribe or leave a like or anything. It just helps the video get pushed more, and on top of that too, it's just cool to get to know more people and stuff through this. So yeah, if you have any thoughts in the comments too, make sure to comment them. So without further ado, we will get right into number 5 on the things that PS5 needs to improve. Now, for starters, my main griefs kind of come with the home screen, to be honest with you. We saw on the PlayStation 3 it gave you extremely extensive customization with being able to have custom themes. You were able to upload your own photographs, and you were able to use those as wallpapers, and then you were able to still use the themes on top of it to change the icons and stuff like that. You could even use the web browser on the system to download your own various themes from tons of awesome websites, and overall it was just a really cool feature that really added a nice personal touch to the system. PS4 also did kind of have the themes return. Well, I mean, they did have themes return. There were some really cool ones too, like the Final Fantasy VII Remake theme was beautiful. Capcom put out a Resident Evil 25th anniversary theme that was really cool. And then, if you were a cool cat like me and you knew how to get the PlayStation 2 classic theme on the PlayStation Store, it was just a really fun time, and I really missed that level of customization and having like custom menu icons and sounds and stuff like that. And the PS5 just doesn't really have any of that. You really just have a bunch of ads for each individual game you have on your system. And some newer PS5 games, yes, do have really nice menu music and wallpapers when you go over to them, which I do think are really cool. It would just be nice to customize like a permanent fixture almost, I guess. It's just something I think the system is kind of lacking, is in personalization. Next is one I'm pretty sure we could all agree on, but since I'm not familiar with the tech end of things and I'm technologically illiterate, backwards compatibility. I know it's not as simple as just snapping their fingers and, you know, getting it on the system, but I do think it's something that the PlayStation 5 is lacking quite a bit. Now, I am very grateful that they do have PS4 backwards compatibility, because half the games I have on my PS5 obviously are PlayStation 4 games, more than half actually, because as everyone knows, the PS5 doesn't really have games. One game, I don't know why. I mean, we're getting pretty good games, they're just stretched very far in between, which I'm going to address in my next point, but for now we're going to stick to backwards compatibility. Now, since PlayStation 2 is just kind of really being considered retro at this point, PlayStation 3 and the 360 era of games really aren't considered retro, so they're not really getting special treatment like the PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 1 games really are, with all these fancy new remakes and remasters and stuff like that. The PS2 era hasn't really gotten that yet. Yeah, we had Shadow of the Colossus and stuff like that, but nothing really crazy yet in terms of that, and a lot of these games are just falling into obscurity because of it. God Hands being one of the best examples of this. It's made by Shinji Mikami, Capcom owns it, and it's one of the best fighting games, beat-em-up games you could probably ever play. And if you don't want to spend $200 on a copy, you have to get a PlayStation 3 and pay $10 for it, which I don't mind because I've had a PS3 and I've had the game on there for a really long time. Or you get an import copy and play a Japanese PS2, but as of right now, those are the only 3 really ways to play the game, all of which could be considered inconvenient to the average gamer. But even besides that though, the PlayStation 3 just in general had a really great business model for the classic system, and you were able to just buy these really awesome and rare games for like $5 to $10 a piece. And a lot of the games on there were really good, and they're really expensive now. I mean, Fatal Frame's another example. The Silent Hill HD collection I know has some problems with it, but it is available on the PlayStation 3, and if you are a PlayStation 3 owner, I would say that it's probably the best and most affordable option to play most classic survival horror, with even the original Resident Evil trilogy being available on there for only $5 to $6 a piece. It's just a really awesome business model I wish they would bring back, which does bring me into the next point of PlayStation Now just has to go. People are getting nickel and dime these days for pretty much everything from, you know, streaming services. Like every single studio or network has their own streaming service now. Now on top of that too, we have that for games, and there's no sense of ownership anymore, and it's just a real shame that, you know, oh, the catalog can just update one day and all of a sudden the games are going to be gone. And this is an argument you hear from a lot of people that do believe in ownership of games or media in general. And, you know, a lot of us get written off from time to time, but this did literally just happen with Sony recently, where games were just mysteriously disappearing from people's libraries, and those were games they bought, which is insane. It's just kind of a shame that they're really treating the system like this. But I don't know, especially their classics, and I just don't think PS Now is that good of a service, to be honest with you. My internet is pretty good now, but I remember a time when it wasn't, and I tried streaming Siren Blood Curse, and it came out really, really horrible, and it was just not a great way to play it. I really don't like streaming games, I would rather just play them. I think there is an option to download them now, but I mean, still though, it goes back to the whole ownership thing. Like, I'd rather just have it downloaded on my system, and then all of a sudden it's not available one day. Okay, cool, it's still downloaded on my system, because if you guys remember, the same thing also happens with PT, which was a whole debacle on its own, but now the only way to play it is if you left it installed all these years, because it's removed on everything. And this can go into a whole physical media argument that I will definitely support, or I could make a video on in the future, but for now we're gonna keep kind of zoned in on PlayStation 5 for the time being, which will bring me to my next point. I want you guys to think really carefully for a second about why Nintendo is still such a solid option for gamers, but also why it's still staying in the race despite the fact that the Nintendo Switch is severely underpowered compared to its competitors. Is it just that their exclusives are really good and only available on the platform? Is it that they're absolutely dominating in the handheld market? Those are two definitely legitimate claims, but there is also a secret third thing that I think Nintendo has whipped up their sleeve that not a lot of people realize. If you look at the front of a GameCube, if you look at the front of a Nintendo 64, if you look at how the Nintendo Switch is designed, you know, the GameCube and N64 have 4 controller slots on the front, right? The Nintendo Switch already comes pre-packaged with 2 controllers. It's a very couch co-op, you know, family-oriented console. It really encourages people to do couch co-op. And when I think of PlayStation or even the Xbox platform, there really aren't too many couch co-op games anymore. They've, for the most part, focused on multiplayer, which, well, I'll admit, you know, Nintendo is 100% slacking in. The Nintendo online service they have for the Switch is really not that great. But when it comes to couch co-op, I think PlayStation really needs to step up their game on those kinds of exclusives and stuff like that. Because there's definitely times I'll have my friends over, and I don't have a Switch at the moment, that I'll want to have everyone over, play some games and stuff like that, but then it's like, well, I can think of probably like 2 games off the top of my head that are even available on PlayStation 4 that do that. And I mean, even Xbox has like Castle Crashers, and that's a really fun game too, and I feel like Sony should probably utilize more games like that as well. And this also treads nicely into my 5th point, that PlayStation in general just kind of needs more exclusive titles. Now, I'm not saying the PlayStation exclusive titles we have are bad, they're just limited, and I'm aware that it takes a lot longer to make games now. I am 100% aware of this factor, that it takes a really long time to make most of the games Sony makes because they're very high in graphical fidelity and everything like that. Again, not familiar with the tech aspect of things, but they're essentially like movies at this point. And it's fun to have games like that. The Last of Us First one is a good game. Last of Us 2, not so much, but that's not related to the production of the game. The overall quality of it is good. It's just the writing and everything not good. Spider-Man 1 and 2, not really my cup of tea, but they're great games. God of War, again, not really my cup of tea, but they're great games. But I think the PlayStation really needs to utilize more, again, of a Nintendo kind of policy where even though the Nintendo Switch is an underpowered console, the games they have kind of utilize a more artistic style of game that I think Sony has kind of broken away from over time in favor of more realistic games. And I think this is kind of hindering them in the process because there's such a giant gap in between releases now that they could fill with games that have more of a stylistic approach to them, like Hi-Fi Rush on Xbox was. And of course now that's on PlayStation as well, but you get my point though. I think if PlayStation did really utilize these like more stylistic kind of games and stuff like that, it would really help fill in the gaps between their major releases and also give us PlayStation players something more to play. I think it would just benefit everyone greatly in the long run. They wouldn't cost as much to produce, and if they do kind of bomb, it's not a huge loss on their part. I just seems like a really like easy fix to the whole, you know, PlayStation has no games thing. But I also do think a lot of those should be couch co-op as well, so you can have more people over, you know, for parties and stuff like that with PlayStation. So I think those are just 5 things off the top of my head that I've been thinking about I really would like the PlayStation to do. If you guys agreed with the list, I would love to hear your comments down below. If you disagree with me at all, that's fine too, would love to hear it. And, you know, if you just liked this kind of video, you liked my style of video or the editing or whatever it was about it, make sure to subscribe and stick around. I would love to have you on the channel. I really love making these videos and stuff, so more people are watching them, you know, more the merrier, right? But anyways, that's going to conclude it for this video. I hope you guys all have a very good night.